Generative AI offers insurers a promising pathway to extract additional value from their investments and accelerate their modernization efforts. While generative AI has a potential to transform most core insurance functions, it's essential to start small, prove the incremental business value, and quickly scale up as part of a well thought out holistic adoption roadmap is very important. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Analytics Insight podcast, where we talk about the ever evolving tech space. And I'm your host, Priya Dialani. Now, the starting point of this journey will vary for different property and casualty insurers. Now, depending on the impact of industry headwinds across the different lines of business and maturity of the current technology estate in various core functions. Hence, insurers will need to prioritize mandates that require urgent attention and those that could result in quick wins. Now, let's welcome Ken Tolson, a Chief Executive Officer Turvi, and we will be understanding how AI is tackling specific pain points in claims processing. What are some real use cases we will be showing, and what they show the most promise, and how the industry is balancing automation with human judgment. Hi, Ken. How are you doing?
I am well. Thank you for having me, Priya.
Great. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Ken. And of course, we are going to talk specifically about the property and casualty insurance vertical and how generative AI is proving to be a competitive advantage for these insurance companies. So, before we dive deeper into our conversation, our listeners would like to know more about Turvi, a very interesting name, I would say. So, if you could brief us about the organization, its specialization, it would be great.
Sure. Turvi was launched in October of 2024 as a rebranding of the digital solutions practice that was wholly owned and operated by our parent corporation, which is Crawford Company, which many people will probably recognize. But we spun this segment off, which I lead today, to focus purely on SaaS, software as a service offerings into primarily the property and casualty ecosystem, not just the claim side of the industry, but the total vertical, the property and casualty space. However, being a claim solution focused entity, the preponderance of our focus has been in the claim space, which you and I will dig into a little bit further here. But our focus is really about providing solutions in that space. And as you can imagine, much of our focus has been around generative AI since that technology has become, more or less a household name in 2024 and 25.
Great. Thank you for that overview, Ken. And it really helps set the stage for today's conversation. I think what stands out is how your organization isn't just addressing industry challenges, but also rethinking how businesses can unlock new opportunities through your specialization. And of course, it's always fascinating to hear how a particular company's mission and expertise can come together to create a wonderful impact. Moving ahead, Ken, throughout your career, you have focused on early recognition of disruptive process and technology, and you have driven key initiatives around self-service claim processes, business process improvement, and data and analytic initiatives, and all of these efforts that aim to improve the customer experience. So, can you tell us more about yourself? How has the journey till date? What triggered the birth of Turvi, and what exactly do you look after Turvi?
Yeah, my history in the industry has really been one of moving between operational areas, primarily in the P&C claim space or the affinity and accident and health space, working for our TPA operations inside of Crawford and Company, and then moving back and forth between leading technology initiatives. And I even served as our CIO for a brief stint several years back for our legacy US P&C business. So yeah, throughout my career, which has almost completely been within the Crawford and Company ecosystem, has been either driving operations or adopting and implementing technologies to change the way we conduct business, continuously look to modernize our technology stack itself. And that's ranged from, just as you mentioned, it's ranged everything from business analytics to data and cloud migration, the process enhancements, the things we're seeing today that COVID really accelerated around self-service and the 3D modeling technologies that we have today, really rethinking the way we handle claims, especially in the property and casualty space, through self-service, through alternative inspection models and technologies to support those processes. So I've worked all around this space for 20 plus years, really trying to revamp the way we do business and constantly stay ahead of the curves that we see coming. And this latest curve, which is, really started back in 2022 with generative AI, has been one of the steepest curves to date in terms of trying to find use cases that we can execute on with current technologies that we have today and sort of current state of our digital world that we live in to be able to leverage these technologies. So that's really been my journey throughout the holistic claims ecosystem.
That's fantastic to hear, Ken, and thank you for walking us through your journey and the impact you are making within the organization. I think our listeners will find it inspiring to see how leadership today is increasingly about bridging strategy, technology, and execution. Now, building on that, when we are talking about the role of generative AI in insurance, now property and casualty insurance covers everything from car accidents and home damage to natural disaster claims. When disaster strikes, customers expect fast action. But behind the scenes, insurers are dealing with mountains of data, adjusted notes, photos, policy clauses, incident reports, repair estimates, and even probably sometimes sensor or IoT readings. Now, all of this data comes in different formats and from different sources. So, what specific gaps or inefficiencies in traditional claims processing inspired your team to integrate generative AI into your product roadmap?
So that's a really good sort of level setting, is that there are a vast number of use cases for generative AI. And when we started looking at use cases literally 3 or 4 years ago now, the challenge we had was, where do we focus? Because there are so many opportunities to apply this technology, also depending on the maturity of your digital core, as you might say, the core of your organization. Is it ready to really unleash the power of generative AI? So we went through lots of different use cases, many of the ones you just mentioned, whether it was IoT, sensor data reading or interpretation, or it was things like summarization of claim files or claim records that come from a myriad of data sources. But where we landed back then was around coverage, which also is an extremely complex area in the PNC space. When you think about all of the different products, all of the different forms that are in place today, the variations of those forms from state to state in the US, let alone globally. And then you think about things like ENS coverage and manuscript policies. There's just a vast ocean of data and formats that are really sometimes overwhelming for adjusters if they're handling large and diverse territories and geographies. So we started with coverage. And the other reason for it was is that coverage is the most important sort of milestone or hurdle you have to cross in the investigation of a claim to make sure there is coverage so that you can move forward. So we tackled this first and started really learning that in our client set within Crawford, there was a lot of diversity in terms of capability. And what I mean by that is some carriers had very digital ready policy administration platforms that we could ingest coverage forms, coverage endorsements, deck pages, things like that, to really give us a quick snapshot of the metadata behind what's really going on with this claim and the rules that confine it, but also being able to ingest that into an LLM, either pre-loss and then post-loss, once we know the deck page and the specific policy that we're applying the interpretation to, and then be able to ingest that and render an opinion to an adjuster in real time, in sub-seconds or less than 30 seconds, which would typically take an adjuster some length of time, maybe up to an hour, to really investigate coverage and read through coverage. So we found it as a great use case for this, but it also depends on, back to that digital maturity sort of score an organization has. Your ability to use this tool is really dependent upon your ability to deliver the subject matter in a digital ready state to consume. But that's been our focus. That product was our first product in the generative AI space. It launched into full production earlier this year, and we've been very successful. And we've had a tremendous industry response to it as well in terms of readiness to adopt or willingness to explore. And we think it's really going to change it. One, it will change the way we interpret policy and interpret coverage and make it much more rapid. But we'll even be able to make this available to the consumer, not just the adjuster. But also, it provided a framework for us to build on inside of the sort of LLM and generative AI space to then go to that next use case and that next use case and the next use case.
That's an insightful perspective, Ken, and thank you for sharing that. Of course, when we are talking about the overall insurance industry, we are definitely dealing with vast ocean of data and formats. And by weaving generative AI into a specific product roadmap, I think it's not just about automation, adding automation. It's about creating an adaptive system that learns context, reduces friction, and ultimately improves trust for both insurers and policyholders. And I think the shift also underscores something larger, that we are not looking at AI as back office helper, but as a frontline partner that can completely reimagine how claims are resolved. And for the industry, I think that means faster turnarounds, sharper accuracy, and better customer experience all rolled into one. I think, and moving ahead, when we are talking about the advantages of generative AI, I think insurance industry leaders are also beginning to understand the value that generative AI can bring, value to the claims management process, because we are making use of technologies like machine learning and even sometimes natural language processing. I think all of these sophisticated systems can analyze and prioritize claims with unprecedented efficiency and timeliness. So, as insurers begin to integrate these advanced technologies into their operation, the entire landscape of claim management is being reshaped, and it is leading to a more faster and a more customer friendly experience. So, can you walk us through a typical claims workflow and highlight where generative AI adds the most value?
Sure. So when you let's just take a property like a personal lines homeowners claim or commercial lines property claim, for example, where you go from the moment of FNOL. So this is one of the use cases that we're working on today is using AI to drive the voice workflow for reporting a claim. So that's the very first moment that a claim happens after inception. Once the event or loss has occurred, typically it involves either some form of web reporting, online type reporting, or voice reporting. So now there are many use cases out there already leveraging generative AI to drive that voice script, where before you may have to script that into a call center. Now AI can adapt while you're reporting that claim and cover much more content by reacting to the data being provided either by voice or by interaction via a web form or SMS, whatever the channel you want to engage the policyholder or the person reporting the claim. Really, any medium or channel you want to engage, it can adapt to and then collect that information and begin building that claim record more so than just the typical first notice of loss engagement, but also take steps like assisting with triage identification, how severe the loss is, how complex the loss is, what is the coverage conference. Back to my earlier use case, assessing coverage through that process and actually in real time being able to reference the policy information while they're in that channel with the policyholder or reporting, stakeholder, to be able to really capture better data more quickly. And that's really, I think, the first really aha use case we uncovered is that we can pull together much more data through the power of leveraging generative AI if these data sources are available, to be able to look at coverage, to be able to look at deck pages, to be able to look at triaging from a complexity severity standpoint, all through these interactions, to your point, to really accelerate the claim lifecycle itself. And then once you get into things like time to do assessment and quantum, what we found with our own exploration in the coverage space is once you start feeding values into it, the AI will attempt to adjudicate the claim. Now, ultimately, you still are bound by regulatory requirements from licensing for, typical adjusters. So what we have really worked to is to create a great experience between adjuster and AI agent to be able to feed information and to have the adjuster then get the value of that assimilation of data, provide the citations to wherever this data and judgments are coming from, so that they can validate and provide feedback to the model as well to continually train and improve the prompting of the model. But that's just a couple of use cases in the very beginning of a claim, both the reporting of the claim, the coverage assessment, the triaging assessment, and then really accelerating that first life cycle of the claim that might have taken days or weeks before, well, probably days before. You can compress that time and truly accelerate the life cycle itself, which ultimately is one of the biggest, customer experience lifts you can provide, is to accelerate the claim and accelerate the restoration of the policyholder back to pre-loss conditions. And then when you get further down the claim, what we find is the assimilation of all the data points to look at historical data. How many times has this, property been affected, or this, what is the loss history on this particular property? What are the other risk factors, weather data collection, things like that. All of this stuff can be pulled and assessed and then summarized and served up to an adjuster to really accelerate their workflow so that they can do what humans are best at, is exercising judgment and providing that human connection to the policyholder, and spend their time in that space as opposed to the clicking and chasing that they might have to do from a data aggregation standpoint, and let that agent, that AI-based agent, do that work and really in parallel to their work and really time compress the overall life cycle.
That's a very fantastic breakdown of how usually the claims workflow is and the touch points where generative AI really makes an impact. I think this is kind of helping insurance overall from being reactive to truly proactive. I think instead of just processing claims faster, Gen AI and AI is actually enabling insurers to anticipate customer needs, mitigate risks earlier, and even build the trust in the process. And like you said, I think when we are trying to focus on the customer experience, generative AI isn't just about increasing the or improving the efficiency. It's kind of reimagining the way a customer experience is, and because generative AI, when it comes into the picture, it is kind of speeding up the claim process. But on the other hand, it's not just speeding; it's also ensuring accuracy and enhancing and improving empathy as well. And I think that's a really powerful combination for both policyholders and insurers. Moving ahead now, one of the an important aspect when we talk about insurance is the first notice of loss. And it often marks a decisive moment in the life cycle of any claim. It shapes how customers experience a particular brand during vulnerable situation and sets the groundwork for accuracy and operational flow. Now, recently, many companies have started to revisit this early stage process, not just to gain efficiency, but to rethink how it fits into a more connected and a digital strategy. Now, according to McKinsey, automation in claims processes has the potential to reduce the processing time by 50%, particularly in stages such as the first notice of loss and basic investigation. So, how are you using AI to reduce turnaround time or manual intervention in the first notice of loss and subsequent claim decisions?
Yeah, our exploration so far in FNOL has been a couple of different paths. One, we support a fairly large catastrophe operations group within the Crawford organization through our call center, our human powered call centers today. And one of the biggest challenges those groups face is scaling. When an event happens, you may go from a period of time where you're used to receiving, say, 100 claims, and you receive 1,000 or more claims. So the scaling aspect with humans is a particularly big challenge in the call center space. So what we found was, as we started to look at using AI, generative AI, to drive this voice experience itself, and this technology has been in place now for several years, at least some variation of it, to be able to either prompt call center agents by listening to the call to ask better questions or direct the questions versus the traditional method of scripting. But now it's gotten to the point, not only can it handle the conversation, but it also can do so in as many as 100 languages. It can detect language and then be able to adapt this conversation base. So we have a customer that challenged us about a year and a half ago now to create just such an experience with in 22 different languages based on their operating regions throughout the globe. So it was a great opportunity for us, one, to have a client driving sort of the requirements for a development like that. But also we knew that if we could create a multilingual FNOL agent, the market would be absolutely interested in that. So we started investing in that with a couple of different partners. We're a big OpenAI Azure cloud development shop. So we using that platform as well, but we've experimented with the others as well. But we started down this path and to create truly a workflow that could, one, detect the language you're speaking or the caller is speaking, and then move them through an omni-channel type of experience to report a claim. And our goal was to keep 80% of those calls within the call center, within the AI agent experience, and then still have a failover opportunity into a human agent if needed. So that's what we delivered for this particular client. But that's sort of the use case of not only can it scale tremendously that you really struggle to do with people, powered call centers. So we can scale from one agent to 1,000 agents simply by scaling the cloud environment. And then two, we can detect and manage across many languages, which is really important even in the US, which is predominantly English speaking, but there's a heavy Spanish demand. And then, our friends in Canada we cover both French and English. And then we've obviously exported this to Europe, which has been a bigger challenge, but it's just phenomenal what this technology can do to be able to, meet a customer where they want to be met, deal with them via voice, deal with them via a chat channel, or deal with them via a web form. Then if they really want to talk to a human, we can accommodate that as well, which I think there will always be some need for that regardless, but it gives us much greater scaling capability with this technology now.
That's a really powerful example of how AI is changing the insurance value chain. And it makes me think about how these innovations are setting a new industry standard. If one insurer can deliver some new instant claim assessments, I think others will need to follow or the risk falling behind. So I think in a way, this is less about technology as a tool and more about technology as a competitor differentiator. Moving ahead, when we're talking about generative AI, I think generative AI also has its own, I wouldn't say downsides, but there are certain challenges when you're trying to implement generative AI. Now, the large language models behind generative AI are based on massive data sets from publicly available knowledge bases like the internet. Now, these are static, often outdated, and usually don't contain the domain understanding for addressing some industry specific tasks. And of course, all of this results in very generic responses that sometimes don't meet your objectives. So often, Gen AI models can't answer simple questions that only require a very small amount of specific business context. So, what were some of the biggest challenges in training Gen AI models for claim specific language, context, and regulation?
That has no question. You called out one of the biggest challenges we have in we encountered in the policy space with our Cover AI tool was the need to really build adequate prompting and training that was unique. And our approach to that was to build these bespoke containerized models to protect the IP and the actual policy language that was provided to us by clients. So these containers required the right type of prompting and really configuration to be able to deliver the output that we were seeking. So one of the great things we learned through this was we really required excellent subject matter expertise from these partners to really test these models against real world examples, real world loss scenarios. But it really more so than just preparing the model for production quality responses, it also helped us bring engagement within the organization to really embrace the technology and to build a sense of ownership around the product itself. So it's been phenomenal, the sort of collaboration that we've developed, because we really are just creating essentially really powerful assistants in that space, and also helping to train younger generations of adjusters and accelerate their learning curve in that space. So it's been a great, it's really been an amazing journey for the companies that have embraced it. And I would say that the other real challenge is something I highlighted early, which is that that whether you're digitally ready or not for to use this kind of technology. Do you have your subject matter in a digital framework that we can easily access? And even if it's simply in PDF format that we can read, we can get to anything, but it literally has to be in some form of digital state to be able to do that. And that's what we see a lot with our customer base is those that are have made the investment strategically to be digitally ready for the future will reap the most benefit from these kinds of technology investments. And I think that's probably true amongst, you could probably use that adage across almost any technology from that front, but it's especially true with generative AI.
Definitely, and I think that's an important perspective. I think training Gen AI models for claims isn't just about feeding them data, it's also making sure that they truly understand the nuances of medical terminology, compliance standards, and the regulatory guardrails that differ from one geography to another. And what you have really highlighted shows how much effort goes into balancing accuracy, context, and governance. Looking ahead, I think the potential applications of generative AI in insurance are enormous. We could see AI driven catastrophe modeling that predicts claim surges after extreme weather events, or intelligent negotiation bots that handle settlements in real time. I think there are a lot of things that we can definitely predict in the future. But just want to ask this question as one final question, that what emerging opportunities do you see for generative AI in other parts of the PNC insurance value chain beyond claims processing?
Well, that's a great question. So when we present our coverage tool, typically into the claim space of a carrier organization, but invariably we will have underwriting at the table as well. That's the first question we get, is seeing how we could apply this tool into the underwriting space. And you're already seeing huge investments in this space, especially on the production side of most carrier operations. But the underwriting landscape, to be able to truly assess risk and risk modeling with the data sources now that are just exploding in terms of what's available to us, from weather data, risk profiling, historical data about the exposures to risk, is just phenomenal. Think about the data that comes off of vehicles now, from the telematics telemetry that comes off of that car itself. There's just so much data now, and honestly, we generate so much data now across this ecosystem that we're going to have tools like this to help us really draw conclusions and make data-driven decisions from this data that we have at our fingertips. And it's really about positioning your organization to be able to leverage that data. And this is really just a powerful tool to be able to enable that and to provide competitive differentiation in this space. So, this is, you can see the amount of both PE and venture capital money pouring into this space. And there's very good reason behind why that's happening. It will reshape this industry, and it will change the way we handle claims. It will change the way we underwrite losses. It will change the hyper personalization capabilities, will change the way we interact with our policies and change the way we interact with our carrier partners. So will absolutely reshape this industry over the next 5 to 10 years.
Definitely. I think Gen AI adoption is no longer an optional consideration, but a necessary requirement for insurers to meet or to be remain competitive in today's rapidly evolving technology landscape. It offers a unique opportunity for insurers to reevaluate their existing processes, unlock untapped creativity and productivity levels, and gain confidence to accelerate their transformation journeys. Well, thank you so much, Ken, to take out the time and effort to be on a podcast today and helping us understand that insurers can reinvent themselves with the help of generative AI and deliver enhanced value to customers, shareholders, and even the overall society in a holistic manner. And insurers that can effectively leverage these advantages will be at the forefront of progress, meeting the dynamic demands of customers and markets. And of course, this that will position themselves for long-term success in transformative AI landscape. Thank you so much. It was lovely chatting with you.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So, this is for our listeners. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and you found our conversation valuable. Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with colleagues who are curious about the future of insurance and AI. Stay tuned until next time, and you can view all our previous podcasts on Spotify and other leading platforms. Thank you so much.